60-plus years as a Christian. However, if we're honest with ourselves, we've all had times of frustration and depression that test our mental health. That being the case, it's only appropriate that we arm ourselves with tools and techniques that help us as Christians recognize and manage our minds as we encounter situations that can tax our mental health. Therefore, the elders decided to offer a special class on mental health and the Christian. The course is entitled Spiritual Judo, Managing Your Mind for the Lord. Now, we've had brochures. We've advertised this quite frequently here. There's a few more brochures out there. If you need additional, we'll ask Jess to get them printed out. There's information on in the brochure here with regard to the overview of the class and also information about Bill. I could literally take the entire class time going over the bio that Bill presented in his work, but I'm not going to do that and let him bring that into light as he feels important to do so. But Dr. Bill Searcy, a brother in Christ, he's agreed to teach this class, and he's uniquely qualified. Ever since I've been in Raleigh, and that was 1981, I've known of Bill, but I didn't have the pleasure of meeting him until he actually had retired from the mission field where he was actually smuggling Bibles into to Russia, spending time in the jungles of Belize for several years, and actually doing work in Africa for almost 20 years there. Since we first met several years ago, Bill has been a good friend and offered sound advice on several occasions. You know, it is really a treat to have someone, a Christian brother, a counselor with Bill's credentials, and he's got more credentials than I could almost be able to identify. And he's acquired these just because he's wanting to come in and be able to be an effective minister. And yes, he does preach, and he does counseling. In fact, he's had a counseling activity with SearcyCare LLC since the year 2010. This brochure that I mentioned will identify some of Bill's experiences, but get to know him, find out what he's done. He's experienced things, he's experienced frustrations. It's not a matter of him taking this information textbook. He's lived it. He's lived a full life. He's been to literally every continent on this planet, including Antarctica, and he's visited over 80 countries. He's been around a while, and he's fluent in a bunch of different languages on that. But I very much appreciate Bill's willingness to teach his class from now until right before Thanksgiving. I have told Bill several times, he reiterated this, tonight, that it comes 7:35, he's going to hear a chime that's going to come in, and that's time to slow down. It comes in at 7:40, trap door opens, the sharks hadn't been fed in a couple of weeks. But we do this because we want the people to come in and be able to participate in our devotional. What Bill has agreed to do, and he offered this on his own, that after the conclusion of the devotional, if you have personal questions, and we're not turning this into a counseling session, you can visit him if you want to get on his schedule. It's pretty well jam-packed on that. You can come up after class, and he'll spend time. He lives in Rocky Mount, but he's willing to spend time with us tonight. And every time we have our class coming in and answering personal questions. So, Bill, I'll turn it over to you. We've got a good attendance tonight, which I'm very appreciative. And preach to us.
Thank you, Matt. You okay? Thank you for that introduction. It's good to be back with you. I don't know how many of you were here back in 2016. I did a seminar here on grief at that time, and I already knew some of you and got to know others of you at that time, but it's really a delight and a pleasure to be with you and to be able to share what I have to share with you tonight. One thing that I do want you to know is this will not cover every possible question that you might have. It will not make all of us counselors in here tonight, but it will help you in working in your own life, in your own heart and soul, in ways that will be meaningful to you and to be helpful. You'll see what I'm talking about as we go. I think most of us in here know what Judo and Jiu-Jitsu is, martial arts forms that actually where you flip people over your shoulder or over your side, and some of you may have done that in the past, but in actuality, when your opponent is bigger than you are, that is actually an advantage to you because you use their power, their mass, their weight to flip them. Now, I don't know how to do Judo, but I've seen it done, and but this is what we'll be learning is how to do spiritual Judo in your own life and in helping other people to do this. I'm going to be operating two computers here. Now, as we get started, I've asked that there are some handouts of this. This is a major part of what we're going to be doing. It is not the only major part, but it is a major part, and it is extremely important, and I'm going to give it to you at the very first because we'll be referring back to it over and over and over again. And it would be good if you could take this out tonight and study over this during the week so that in the subsequent weeks you will be able to have this right in your mind and in your memory. So this is a formula. This type of formula is one of the most evidence-based researched formula and type of counseling and therapy that you can find. You will note that it has parallels with cognitive behavioral therapy. I'm going to look at this or bring this to you in a sense in a spiritual way. And I do want you to know that we're going to look at Scripture. Paul and the Bible writers were not trying to teach us cognitive behavioral therapy. It just so happens that there's some parallels here that help us in our day and time to understand some things. So you see here that A, and then the arrow, that means produces B, and B produces C, and C produces D, and D produces E. The A represents an event or a circumstance. Okay? That is an event or a circumstance. And that produces in us a cognition. That's just another word for a thought. So I have here listed a few of the ways that we might look at this as thought, belief, an interpretation of what's happened, an opinion, a reflection, or a perception that we may have. And we could go on with listing other things here. But that thought, now this is the way your soul operates. This is the way you operate on the inside. And you're going to see this scripturally. But that thought produces C, which is affect, which is just another name for feelings and emotions and moods. But feelings and emotions and moods, affect, basically what that is, they are monitors to our thoughts. So when you feel something, you're feeling something because of some cognition that you had. And a lot of times it happens so fast we don't even realize what we were thinking. And so what we have to do, and we'll talk about this a lot more in another time, we want to backtrack and go back and ask the question, what was I thinking about just before I started feeling whatever it is? But you want to identify what that feeling is first. Feelings are extremely important. God made them. They're there for a purpose. They're not good or bad, right or wrong, but they are monitors and let us know something about what we're thinking. They are also energy. Every emotion you have, whether it's joy and happiness and glee, whether it's sadness or grief, or whether it is anger or fear, produces within us energy, certain type of energy. You say, well, man, when I'm grieving, I don't feel energy. Well, the energy you're feeling that makes you feel like laying in bed or crying or doing something or not doing something, that is a type of energy. We'll talk more about that as time goes on. But just remember that emotion is energy. Then the affect or the emotion produces behavior. And behavior is either positive or negative, good or bad, healthy or unhealthy. It is holy or unholy, righteous or sinful, and you name it. So as Christian people, we want our behavior to be healthy, holy, and constructive behavior, and not destructive and sinful behavior. But whatever that feeling is, there is a list that you can develop of positive or negative things that you can do with that feeling. Okay? You with me so far? And that behavior will produce consequences, results, whatever you want to call it. It is going to, something will happen. Now, ideally, I think the way that God made this was so that these consequences would deal with the event. Okay? Now, there are two places that you can go in this model if you have disturbing feelings or disturbing behavior. You can go and you can, number one, if you change the cognition, if you change the thought, if you change the interpretation of the event, you can change the feeling and the behavior. And sometimes that will be just like that. And other times it will take years. All of us have developed from the time we were babies, from the time we were born, possibly even in the womb. That's a little bit harder to research. But certainly from the time that we were born, we are developing what we'll call schemas. And these schemas are like lenses. There are billions of stimuli in our environment. Sight, smells, taste, feelings inside, outside, our tactile senses. All of this a baby experiences for the first time, or a young person for the first time. And what happens is we develop a shorthand. There's no way even an adult mind could consciously process all of this. It's hard for a computer to do this, to take all the data that's coming in all the time and to mentally decide what to do with it. So our mind has this amazing ability to make shorthand, to make a lens. And so it begins to see the stimuli and takes the data in and put it through the lens into what we will call a schema. For instance, let's say a child, by the time he or she is 2 or 3 years old, develops a schema. And there are lots of ways this can happen. I'm not going to go into all that right now. But they develop a schema that nothing I ever do is going to be successful. I'm a failure. So that child then grows up with that, and let's say they get to school age, and they come to class, and one day the teacher says, I'm going to give a test tomorrow, and you need to study real hard tonight so that you can pass the test tomorrow. Now, the child's not able to articulate this. Much of this is done pre-verbal when we learn this stuff before we've learned even to talk. So it's more in a sense of a perception, almost a false intuition in a way. And so this child is going to say, well, I'm a failure, so what use is studying for the test going to be? And so they don't study for the test, and the next day, guess what? They fail the test just like they said they would. So that reinforces even more that I'm a failure. Let's say that child gets to be 16 years old, and somehow in class, in high school, they ace a test, 100%, A+. And they get in there, and they are not going to be able to enjoy that A+, because you know what they're going to think? That schema, I'm a failure, is in there, and they will distort the reality of that A and say, teacher must have felt sorry for me and so gave me an easier test. Or the class felt sorry for me and they scored low, so I'd score higher on the curve. Or anything but to say that, hey, I studied hard, I deserve that 100%. You see how that works? And all of us have both positive and negative schemas that we grew up with. Every one of us. And so part of what we do is we try to identify what some of those schemas are, and then to do judo on them. And so that's going to be more of the secret we'll learn later. Another place that we can change our behavior is even if we do have a feeling that comes from a healthy thought, say grief, someone you love dies. That is very normal for you to feel grief. Absolutely normal. If you don't feel grief, if there's someone close to you, then I'm more worried that something pathological is going on. So, you feel this grief, you have a choice. And I want you to hear that really well here. Choice, choice, choice. You have a choice as to how you will express that grief. You say, well, what are you talking about? I could go out, as some people do, I could go out and kill myself. That's how I could deal with that grief. Now, thank God not everybody does that, and hopefully none of you will, but that is a self-destructive way of dealing with a normal, healthy emotion. Or you could go out and have a good cry. You could write some poetry, sing some songs, talk to a friend, do any number of other things that are healthy and good and holy. But right there is where we want there to be a separation, a gap big enough between the affect, between the feelings and emotions and the behavior, so that you know that you can choose a response. Now, I know this happens a lot faster than I'm saying this right now, and if you're not familiar with this, it may be difficult sometimes to get started. But once you get rolling, you'll realize this. So we want to be responsible. Have you ever looked at that word? Response-able, able to respond. Sometimes when I have people, I'll have, now it could be the woman or the man who's been physically violent with their spouse. And, but I've had where a man will say, well, look at his wife in counseling. He'll say, well, I know when I hit you, I know that was wrong, but I couldn't do anything else. I couldn't help it. I'm like, whoa, let's stop it right there. You could help it. You could help it. You made a choice. Now, it may have happened so fast that you weren't aware of that, because probably, maybe you're not even a bad person, but somewhere in your background you did not learn about this gap, that you have choices and that there are other ways other than hitting to deal with anger you have with a spouse. Okay? So what we want to do is we want to learn different things we can do with any of our emotions so that they are expressed and not pushed down. We don't want to repress them. You might have to in a certain moment, but you want to get back to it later to express it. Because if you don't, those feelings will build up and they'll be like in a pressure cooker, whether it's anger, even joy, or any other emotion, fear. All of these will be like a pressure cooker. And eventually what happens if you plug up the hole, the valve in the top of the pressure cooker, what's going to happen? You get an explosion. And something that was meant to cook the food and do something well, do something good, becomes something that kills somebody, hurts somebody, or at the very least makes a big mess. That's what's going to happen if we repress these feelings and don't find a constructive, healthy way to let them out in behavior. You will behave one way or the other. Another thing that is happening while all this is going on is with every emotion that you have, your body produces a cascade of hormones, chemicals in your body. And I'm not going to be medical here with this, so I'm just going to speak very conventionally here with this. But those hormones can build up in your body and eat you up. We think that some diseases may be caused from an overabundance or maybe even an underabundance in some cases of hormones. So you have healthy hormones and they're all healthy at certain levels, but if they build up, they can become toxic. Some of you are familiar with, have you ever heard of cortisone? Okay, you know, it's a stress hormone. God made this, made it so that your body produces this when in stress, and it's very good to help you deal with the stress. It even boosts your immune system, at least at the lower levels, at healthy levels. What can happen with cortisol is if you keep getting stressed over and over and over again, and that cortisol is not healthily worked out in your body and the way you deal with the stress, then it can build up to toxic levels. Or if you just never deal with it, and then it begins to be like, I like to say, it's like acid in your blood. Gradually it can begin to cause problems in your body. Maybe cardiovascular, pulmonary, it could be neurological, could be certainly gastrointestinal, your stomach. These places can be affected by that. That's just cortisol. But there are other hormones that are in your body. When you get afraid, you ever been afraid and you feel that shock that comes up to you? There are other chemicals involved, but there are two glands on the top of your kidneys about the size of my thumbnail, and they're called your adrenal glands, and your body has just shot some of that in there. What if you felt that shock all the time? How long do you think you would survive? I don't actually know the answer to that question, but I don't imagine you could stand that for very long. And also, point is here is that working these feelings out in a constructive, healthy way is important. Now, exercise is a very, very good way to do that. But remember that you're responsible as a person. So this is just kind of a blow-up of the affect-producing behavior. And what we want to do here, you'll notice the box there, that's supposed to be like a sheet of paper. Along with learning this is part of your homework. And that is to take some of the 6 basic emotions, which we'll talk about in a moment, and put one at the top of each of 6 pieces of paper. Draw a line down the middle, and on one column have plus and the other one have a negative, a minus, and then write what would be constructive behaviors that you could do with each of those emotions. And then write on the negative or the minus side destructive things that you might already do, but these would be things that are not working for you. So what we want to do is make it so that our emotions work for us and not against us. Okay? Working for us and not against us. So here, I don't think that back in the back you're going to be able to read that. Maybe some of you have the paper handouts here, but these are 6 of the more basic emotions, and I have those written at the top of each of these pieces of paper with the plus and the minus there. But you'll see joy and peacefulness, powerful, mad or angry, sad, and fear. Those are just 6 basic emotions. Now, there are many others, but again, I'm just giving you this at the first. We're going to go all through in the Bible and show you a lot of this, how this works out even in the Scriptures. William Backus wrote a book in 1985 saying, Telling Each Other the Truth. And I'll just quote this because it goes right along with what we're saying here. It is the content of human thinking that makes the difference between misery and happiness. What matters is not the event, but how a person appraises and evaluates the event. What occurs outside him does not make him joyful or wretched, angry or benevolent, peaceful or turbulent. What he believes, how he cogitates, cognition about the event, makes all the difference. Now, you can agree or disagree with that, and we can come back and talk about that at another time. Oh, I didn't put that up there. There we go. Let y'all look at that just for a second before we move on. I think all of us in here know that Solomon was the wisest man in the world. The Holy Spirit made him the wisest man in the world, tells him to write a book or to collect a book of all the wise sayings of how to live the happiest, most fulfilling, best life. So if you want the best self-help book, go to Proverbs. I don't think anything's beaten it since then. But Proverbs is it. And in that book of Proverbs, Solomon says, above all else, in other words, the most important thing you can do as far as how to live the happiest, most fulfilling, and best life, the most important thing you can do is to guard your heart, for it is the wellspring of life. Everything comes from this. So what do we mean by guarding our heart? I consider all my counseling as I'm helping people learn how to guard their heart. I like to say garden your heart, how to garden or cultivate your heart. You'll see what I mean later. But we have something we can do. We are not passive victims of stuff that happens all around us. We have choice to a large degree. We can choose our emotions. We can choose many of our behaviors. We can't choose everything, but there is a high degree of choice that we have. So it's the wellspring of life. Everything flows from how you handle what is going on within your heart and soul. Our children need to know this. I know y'all are coming up in the future with a parenting class, and I hope they'll get into that. But this needs to be taught even with children. I don't think we're teaching this enough to our young people. Look at the mess that our country's in right now and that the world's in. And I think, personally, I think it's gotten worse in a lot of ways. And I think it's because we've taken ourselves away from, culturally, away from these types of biblical teachings. Proverbs 23:7. In the King James Version, the New King James Version, New American Standard Bible, and the Amplified Bible. I love the way they translate the Hebrew here. And that is, as a man thinks in his heart, so is he. You become what you think. And then in Proverbs 27:19, as water, this is poetic. It's romantic the way this is said. As water reflects the face, so one's life reflects the heart. Isn't that beautiful? So what's in your heart will be reflected in your life. There's something we do sometimes called narrative therapy, and that is where we draw out on a big piece of paper the narrative of a person's life and the high points and low points, and you can pretty much chart what they were thinking and believing by where they were on that narrative chart. What are we looking at on time here? Okay. How many of you know what a galvanic skin monitor is, a GSM? Anybody? How many of you know what a polygraph is? Okay. Now, poly means many, and then graph, many graphs, a lie detector. Now, I don't know, I hear different stories about 80%, 85% effective. Anyway, some people seem to be able to beat them, but they're pretty accurate. And with the galvanic skin monitor, it's one of the graphs that they have on the polygraph. And the galvanic skin monitor, I'll refer to it just as a GSM. GSM, it measures only two things. Number one, it measures how much you sweat by the millisecond. And number two, it measures the salt content in your sweat by the millisecond. Isn't that amazing that based upon what you're thinking and feeling, that can change how much you're sweating and how much salt content is in your sweat by the millisecond? First time I saw this demonstrated was when I was a student at Harding. My first psychology class was about 1973, I think. And the professor probably would be sued for what he did, but we were not as litigious in our culture back then. But we had a class of about 20 students, boys and girls, and the professor knew that there was a boy in the class that was sweet on a girl in that class, but he was too shy to ask her out on a date. Now, none of us knew any of this was going on at the time, but the professor told us about the GSM, and he was trying to describe this about how our feelings produce hormones and electrical charges in our bodies, our thoughts do. Our bodies, our minds, our soul, everything about us are intricately knitted, or as it says in Psalm 139, we're all knitted together. Everything is knitted together. Everything has an effect upon everything else. Body, mind, and soul, they're all connected. The body-mind connection. So, we're in the class. Nobody knew what was going on. The professor described the thing. Now, back then, we didn't have computers, but we had a big TV screen up on the wall, and beside it was a big speaker, for sound. And on the TV screen, there was a graph. It would draw a line, and the graph would do this, and it wouldn't flatline, but it would just kind of bob along the bottom here if nothing was happening. And there was the sound would be just kind of white noise, like, nothing special. And so the professor described this. He showed us there were two clips. Those clips that you put on your fingers at the doctor's office as oximeter. It can tell how much oxygen's in your blood. And so it was kind of like that. And so the professor asked for volunteers. I don't know if the boy raised his hand or not, but he volunteered the boy. The boy gets up there and he sits down and he gets hooked up, and there are two wires, one going to the TV and another one going to the speaker. And so all of a sudden the professor said, "Now I'm going to mention a few words here and we'll see what happens." So I think you see where we're going with this. Of course, at the time, we didn't know anything. And so professor says, tree, book, building, and he mentioned some other words and all that. Then he mentioned that girl's name. That graph was bouncing up and down there. The speaker was about to fall off the wall. The class was rolling on the floor about to die laughing, and the poor boy and girl were almost dead from embarrassment and shame. One thing I wish I'd done is followed up on that to find out if the boy ever asked her out on a date. They might be married now, or who knows, they may have not been able to even talk with each other after that. I don't know. But what's going on inside is going to be coming out. And Jesus even says that. Now, he doesn't tell us about galvanic skin monitors or anything, but he does say that what's on the inside is going to come out. So we've talked about hormones, and we may do some more with that. Well, what are you talking about, lights and moths? Imagine your soul is this big dome. And every time you have a thought, big or small, it's a light that goes off, and it goes up here in the dome here. And your feelings are like moths. What do moths do when they see light? They're attracted to it. They're going to fly to it. That's what your feelings do to thoughts. And so when we have thoughts, we have feelings that are going to go up there to match and deal with those thoughts in some way. The problem is, a lot of times we have not adequately dealt with those thoughts, those lights up there, and there's a whole flock, or whatever moths do, a flock of moths up there, and we can't even see the light anymore. All we see is our feelings. We're overwhelmed with our feelings. We're paralyzed with our feelings. And you come into counseling, or you talk to a friend or a family member, and say, "I don't even know what's going on. I just feel all this sadness or anger or whatever it is I'm feeling. I don't know where this is coming from." Well, so we have to begin to start going in there and trying to find out where are those lights. Let's deal with those thoughts. And you say, well, some of those are little small thoughts. They don't mean much. There's a dump truck that goes out here on the road periodically, and it's full of sand. Now, if you took a grain of sand out of the back of that truck, now that truck weighs, I don't know how much dump trucks weigh, I'll say 5 tons, let's say. 5 tons of sand. But if you take one grain of sand and you try to measure it on a scale, none of us here probably have a scale that would measure that. You'd have to have an awful sensitive scale for that, and a reason to have that kind of scale. But you think about that, whatever that grain of sand weighs, when there's an aggregate, when there are billions of grains of sand there, it weighs down the truck, and you have tons. That's where a lot of our moods and our attitudes and ways that we feel, where they come from. Now, there are other ways too. What I'm presenting here is a version of this, but nothing is a panacea of all things. But remember, light's drawing moths. Okay. Now, we're going to get into some scripture here. Deuteronomy 6:5 in the law. Love, the Hebrew word there is ahab. The Lord, the word there is Yahweh. Love Yahweh, your God, with all your heart and all your soul and with all your strength. Jesus quotes that. It's quoted in 3 of our Gospels. Matthew 22:37, Jesus replied, love, that is the word agape, which has a huge component of choosing, choice. Oftentimes in the Bible when it says, mentions hating God or hating or loving something, it means choice. So love the Lord your God with all, and the word is holes here. It means all, the totality of your heart and with all your soul and with all your mind. Now, how many of us do that wholeheartedly? I think we're working on it, right? I think that's one thing. Just remember about all of us. We're a work in progress. This is what we're trying. This is the goal, the target. Mark 12:30. Love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your mind, and your strength. So in this gospel, the strength is added there also. And also in Luke 10:27, he answered, love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, with all your strength, and with all your mind. So we're going to all these places here. What is this talking about? What does he mean here? And why does he put strength in here? And what's the difference between the mind and the soul? And one thing that you will definitely see is that these words are oftentimes used interchangeably. They overlap. They're not totally separate things. Remember, we're knitted together in our mother's womb. So the next verse we'll look at is therefore 2 Corinthians 4:16. Therefore do not lose heart, do not be discouraged. Though our outer man, and that's the Greek exoanthropos, the general term for man means man, woman, human. But the outer man, the outer human, is talking about our bodies. Even though our outer man is wasting away, now I'm 70 years old, I'm beginning to waste away some, I do believe, in some cases. Now I don't feel that on the inside, but sometimes if I try to play tennis and jump for a ball there and land on the tennis court, I don't get up quite as quickly as I did when I was a lot younger. But our outer man is wasting away, yet our inner man, this is esoanthropos, or anthropos is added there, the inwardly, the person, the inner self, the person on the inside, the non-body part of us, is being renewed day by day. This is the progress of Christians, and what we're going to be learning to do with that model that I gave you about ABCDE, we're going to be learning how to work with God in this process of renewal day by day. Those schemas I talked about before that we develop by the time we're 5 years old, you already probably have hundreds of them. And so those negative ones, those that don't fit anymore and are not right, those are hard to come out. And so we spend a lifetime maybe working on some of that. But we're being renewed day by day. In Romans 12:2, do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed. That is the same word we use for metamorphosis. Be a caterpillar coming out of a cocoon. Making a cocoon and coming out as a moth or a chrysalis and a butterfly. But this metamorphosis, this change that's happening within that cocoon or the chrysalis, there's a body change that's happening in us. I know from the rough life that I lived before I was a Christian, I can to this day see people who haven't seen me a long time, and they will say, I cannot believe that you are the same person. This is not the same Bill Searcy I knew back in 1968 or 69. And I'm I take that as a compliment for the Lord, and that, because it wouldn't happen without the Lord. But he says, by the renewing or the renovation of your mind. The Greek word here is nous, for mind. And we'll see that words are oftentimes used interchangeably as well. So I don't know how well you can see this, but within each of these circles is soul, heart, mind, spirit, and strength. All of these words are sometimes used interchangeably. So each of them has their own specific type of meaning in certain contexts in the Bible, but yet sometimes the same word that's used for heart or soul will be translated that. So you might say you see where the circles come together in the middle there is the commonality there. And you'll see as we go here. All right. Heart. Hebrew levav or lev. New Testament cardia. We get cardiology and cardiologist and all from this, heart. Now people then, as today, we associate feelings with body parts. And we associate our emotions usually with the heart. People didn't always, in the old days sometimes, and some of the Greek shows this too, it was the liver that was considered the seat of the emotions, or the kidneys, or the intestines, okay? So the word compassion is, some of the words that we translate compassion are basically, my intestines are acting up because of meaning this emotion anyway. I think most of us in here are old enough to remember the old song, Baby, Baby, Can't You Feel My Heartbeat, or Hear My Heartbeat? I guess back in those days it'd be, Baby, Baby, Can't You Feel My Liver Quiver? But the neat thing about this is that the science today, medical and psychological research is showing that this mind and body, the emotions are intricately connected. They affect each other. When I was a chaplain at Duke University Hospital, when I came back from Kenya, I did that for a couple of years in the CPE program there, and I can remember that when I'd go into a patient's room, that person may be in there for a heart attack. But I knew when I went in, and I may never know the real reasons, but I knew it could be purely physiological for that heart attack, genetic or some other cause physically, or it could be emotional. Maybe this person's lived and worked in a high-stress job for 30 or 40 years, but never learned how to work out his stress in a constructive type of a way, and eventually the hormones, remember the hormones and other things that are going on in our body, cause a heart attack. Thirdly, it could be spiritual. Maybe this guy committed adultery when he was 30 years ago. He never talked to God or anybody else about it, and the guilt hormones are building up in him for all that time, and it's had an effect on his body. So my point here is all of this here is intricately connected with our body. So our time is running out. The heart. When we talk about in our classes in the future about the heart, we're talking about emotions, feelings, affect, moods, will, volition, which is kind of the will. Remember that emotions and feelings are not good or evil. It's what you do with them, the behavior, that's either good or bad, right or wrong. The most mature person can express his or her feelings and ideas in appropriate ways at the appropriate times, and this is called assertiveness. Now later on, after we move past this kind of section of what we're doing now, we're going to get into communication, and we'll get into relationship building and maintenance. And so I guess we need to call it now. Okay. It's good being with you guys.
Thank you.
My pleasure.